The Palo Alto Network's firewall, high availability configuration. So we're going to take those things that we talked about before and actually see them in action, the different parts that we got to do to get my high availability up and running. So I figure kind of the fun part is we'll just go ahead and dive right in. You and I have talked a bit on how this high availability stuff works. Keep in mind what I have, well, really what I have available to play with is PA200s and the PA VMs. The VMs I've got running because we did the IPsec stuff, so I'm going to kind of leave those as they are right now. But you and I can still play with the physical boxes, the PA200s, and get some HA up and running. Now remember what we said about both of them, though, is these devices are the lower end ones, so while we can see my high availability stuff, we're only able to do high availability light. Okay, or HA Lite. So we're not going to have the full session mirroring between them or the stateful portion of things being shared. However, it will share config and allow us to work very nicely in that aspect in an active-passive role. So I do have things cabled up. We have Ethernet 1.1. I have a back-to-back cable between the two firewalls. So I went ahead and kind of did all that in the background, mostly because we really can't see it on here. But that part is set up for us. So one of the things that we'll need to do really on both of these firewalls is go into the interface right now and go to here actually, and I guess we got a virtual wire that was defined anyway. Whatever we have on here, we're going to have to end up destroying. So that's kind of the bummer part for it. So Ethernet 1.1, we're now going to go put into HA mode, and it'll ask us this information right here, which we can leave it just as auto. Anything that we want to do, perfectly fine, but we can let it be at auto, and unless you have a problem, that'll work, or unless you really like to hard code stuff. Being that these are the same devices, so not like I can worry about one vendor to another and whether the auto negotiation works in a particular fashion. I certainly know that over the years that has become a problem in some aspects, but here I'm not worried about it because it's exactly the same thing. My Ethernet 1.2, I will just go ahead and change into a tap mode just to kind of kick it out of that virtual wire setting. So we should be fine on those right now. Now, one of the other things, by the way, if we were to commit right at the moment, it would give us an error because, whoops, not my virtual router, my virtual wires, because my virtual wire setup right here has no interfaces attached. So I would just go ahead and delete that. To kind of make it real simple. That way we won't have any errors for it left over. But otherwise, our big thing, of course, is that we went in and did the HA interface setup. So now, after I do this, okay, and I could commit now if I wanted to, no big deal one way or the other, but going to device mode, and specifically, and I'll go ahead and scroll up here where we can see it, is go into the high availability settings. This is kind of going to give us the information as far as where we're at. And we'll see all of the different pieces that we have going along. So my general tab has my setup, my active passive settings, my election settings, anything for the controlled HA1 link. If I were on a larger device, something bigger than my PA200 anyway, I would see the HA2 setup and possibly HA3 on here as well, depending on what I was selecting, what I was going to be doing. So we can go ahead and click on the edit here. We do want to enable HA, pick a number between 1 and 63. It's required, but doesn't matter. We're only just going to do 1. It's kind of simple enough on here. Description if you want to. Mode is active passive on a PA200. Only choice I'm going to have, so kind of go with the flow here with this. And whether or not we're going to enable the sync config. So what we're doing on here is setting up an IP address for HA1. Of what the peer happens to be. Now in this case, I'm just going to set up all ones, then a 1112, just going to keep things very simple. So since I'm on my first router, my lead one, I'll go ahead and make my peer IP address 1.1.1.2. I don't have any need for a backup on it, so I can go ahead and click on OK. And let's see, active passive settings, go ahead and change this. Passive link state, well, you can leave that like it is. Just leave it at automatic, probably be the best part. And then my election settings, device priority auto is perfectly fine. I will want to do preemptive just from my own standpoint. Whenever I do HA design, I like to set not just a preference from a priority point of view, but I like to know that if everything's going well, this physical device, whichever one it's going to be, will be the primary one. And as long as it's up, I don't care whether it went down and came back, whatever it is, it will always take over. So from my point of view, preemptive is a good idea. I know different people have different opinions on it, so do what part you want on there. If you wanted to do a heartbeat backup, remember that was over the management port. Feel perfectly free to do that, or change your timer settings. Remember we had the recommended, the aggressive, or advanced, which will allow us to do custom stuff, and I just keep it at recommended. I kind of keep things very simple on there. So we have that idea, we have those setups, and as far as our control link right here goes, which port are we going to use? We do have choices now that we've configured one as an Ethernet. So I'm going to choose Ethernet 1.1 that I had set up for it. Okay, so once we get that, go ahead and define my address on here. So I said this one was going to be 1.1.1.1, and we do have to spell out the dotted decimal version of the netmask on here. Since it is going to be the same subnet, like I said, don't bother putting the gateway information. I would still do encryption enabled. Entirely up to you what you want to do on that. Just, again, my point of view for this way, if anything changes down the road, it's one less thing that I have to think about on there. And that's my side of the HA configuration. If we had a second control link, I could go ahead and configure that on there. We're not wasting an interface doing that or worrying about that, so that is the way that it is. So this is going to be my commitment or my setup as far as doing the high availability. So I can go ahead and commit everything on here, yep, overwrite the existing configuration, and this is going to put us into that mode where we're waiting. Obviously, we haven't done the other side yet, so it's going to get us into that mode of being ready to do high availability. We have to have a high availability key, so we got to work on that part. Just for the encryption. All right, easy enough. We can go ahead and change that part. So yes, we figured that out, that HA encryption is the part that needs an extra license for, or not a license, a key to be done, which was not imported on here. I haven't gone back through the certificates on here, so we'll just go ahead and back that part off and commit it. So keep things one step at a time. In the long run, like I said, I would want to do that, but I would also go back through here and make sure that we had certificates and that we were doing all the correct things as far as that goes. So good news is we got to see a little bit of failure with it, see what that's going to go on for, and now we know how to move on. And we committed successfully. So right now, again, we're going to go through the list of things it's going to be trying to do the configuration, not being able to talk to the other side, so we'll assume that itself is going to be active on here, so which is perfectly cool. One of the other things that we'll do right now, so just kind of record my information. I'm set up on 1111, other side is going to be 1112. My priority right here is 100, and we're going to be preemptive. All right, so notice that part. So on my number 2 side right here, we're going to do the same type of thing. So we'll go into my network first and look at my interfaces. I don't need to worry about loopback. My Ethernet interfaces. So Ethernet 1.1. Change into HA, get rid of the comment for it, won't need that anymore. Hit OK on that. On 1.2, we'll just go ahead and put it in tap mode to get rid of that virtual wire portion, as we have completely killed that side right now. That's perfectly fine. And our virtual wires, we'll go ahead and delete that so we don't get any of the errors upon commit. And once I do this, then I'm ready to go into my device mode, into the high availability portion, and finish my configuration for it. So click on my edit, enable HA. Group ID has to be the same, so we're group 1 over there, so nothing real festive to it. Config sync, active passive, that's all good to go. 1.1.1.1 is the other peer's IP address for it. So that's that section. Same thing on the link, go ahead and do it to auto. Now here in the election settings, I want to pick a higher number. Okay, the lower number is who happens to win this, by the way. So 110, perfectly fine. Again, my recommended timers, everything's perfectly normal on that. We see the way that things are. And then I'll go ahead and configure my HA link on there. Don't want to do management, do Ethernet 1.1 and put my IP address to it. So I'm .2. My dotted decimal netmask, Gateway is going to be blank. We learned that encryption is not going to be enabled on there, and just go ahead and click OK. At this point, we should be perfectly fine to commit. So we did get a couple errors on here about overlapping rules. Honestly, not going to worry about it because this being the lower priority of the two, its configuration is going to get overwritten anyway. So we're going to sync config and do all that stuff. So not going to worry about that right now. Otherwise, I'd go back and figure out what it was that we had done to have overlapping rules in there. So right now we are set up on both sides for the high availability. We can always go back and click on my dashboard idea, kind of see where we are for things. All right, we have our configuration, commit job, everything that was done on there, saw what it was that was setting up. Back in the device side of things, under high availability, has my general setups on here, doesn't tell me anything in terms of status. I can go into link and path monitoring if I was going to enable any of that or set any of that up. So remember, link monitoring for directly connected things, path monitoring was an ICMP or layer 3 version of it to monitor an entire path along the way, whether it be a virtual wire or a VLAN or a virtual router path. Have some choices in that for what I'm looking at. Operational commands, on the other hand, just give me an idea that I can suspend the local device, which would force a change, well, at least if I were on the active one anyway, it would force the change in the VM status. All right. So those are going to be my differences as far as where we're at. Now, what I can do, let's go over to an SSH setup. So I can go ahead and go in here in SSH and notice that it says active at this point. So my prompt has actually changed for where we're going to be at. So I can do the same thing, connect into the other one. And what it will say from a prompting standpoint, again, tells me exactly what's going to be going on. So I know when I go into the individual device what state that I happen to be in. Passive mode here, active mode on the other one. I can do things, show high availability, like a state, since we're not doing anything else. But this will tell me exactly what's going to be going on, what mode that I'm in, what state that I'm in, when the last change happened to be on here, the management IP information, all the things on here that might match or mismatch and stuff. Okay? So notice from a version compatibility standpoint, my antivirus compatibility is mismatched right now. So this is something that I may want to go back and look at and change, kind of see what's going to be going on with it. So it gives you good indications for things. So everything else we have here tells me what my peer status happens to be, its IP address as well, connection up over the HA link, what all's going to be going on, and the fact that running config right now has not actually started. Okay, so config is out of sync right now. It will go through the process of doing that. So that's the status for how we are for setting up the HA and doing a little bit of monitoring as well. We can go in and do a show high availability all or link monitoring or path monitoring as we get other things set up. It will give us more information or different information anyway for each of those pieces. But for right now, basic state, this is where we're at. All right, so we've gone ahead and done a few things to get our HA actually working, which is an awesome thing to be doing. So we have a highly available, or the beginning of a highly available network anyway. What we did realize, of course, is being on our PA200 or PAVM that we could only be in active passive only and only in what we called HA Lite. Okay, so that meant that really we only had the HA1 interface, which was just for the configuration sync. If we are greater than or equal to PA500, then we also get an HA2 for my stateful algorithms and the ability of doing active-active. Say or active-active. And that'll give us HA3 and some other stuff in there. If I was on my PA3000 or higher, I'll get dedicated interfaces to it, but really the setup is going to be exactly the same thing. It's just a matter of whether I have to take one of my existing interfaces or a dedicated HA1, HA2 interface on there. So that is how we get high availability working. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.